Nurses and doctors of Reddit, what is the weirdest thing someone has done while under anesthetics? Long time lurker and ER nurse here. Had to make an account for this one. I put people out like once or twice a day to set bones, reduce dislocations, or sometimes drain really bad abscesses. Funniest one I can remember is this dude with a dislocated shoulder. Kinda a meek guy and his wife was in the room. Usually we make family leave, but not always. Anyway, start talking to him while we push the drugs and at first he's totally with it. Oh well. My wife and I are going to Hawaii, words getting more slurred, this weekend, eyes droopy, imana FCK the shti out Ava. Almost out. The dirty SLT. Haha. His wife was so red. We all tried not to smile and she excused herself. When I was being put under for oral surgery, the nurses said I started babbling in a strange language and recorded part of it for proof. It turns out I was speaking Welsh. My grandparents were from Wales. Odd thing was, under anesthesia I sounded pretty fluent and conscious. I only know random words and phrases. When I went in to have my appendix removed after it rudely burst, the doctors were trying to keep me in good spirits. So they asked me before I went under for surgery after not feeling well or eating for about 48 hours. Dr. What is the first thing you want to eat? Me. Wendy's. Dr. What are you going to get at Wendy's? Me. Everything. Then I went under for surgery and woke up like 2 hours later and it felt like a cactus had throat fked me, so I obviously asked WTF. Nurse that was with me simply told me that I had woken up in the middle of surgery. I guess I slipped my arm out of the wrist holder restraint and reached over and ripped my breathing tube out and advised I'm f***ing starving, and they apparently freaked out and told me they weren't done, to which I replied, oh I'm sorry. Continue, and passed back out. I remember nothing, but my throat does. As well as the orderly that was laughing about it with me in the AM. TL. Dr. ripped out breathing tube wanting Wendy's during surgery. My dentist kept a big basket of little toys and prizes to reward the youngest patients. You know, mini yo-yos and stickers and stuff. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I remember stumbling over to it and deciding I really wanted a treat. But I was too clumsy from the drugs to pick anything up. So I thought, FCK it. I was so brave. I deserve all of it. And I swept it all into my sweatshirt pocket. Woke up to my sister and her boyfriend laughing at me. Sleeping next to my pile of treasures. Temporary tattoos. Stick-on earrings. Little whistles and pinwheels. Pencils. Bouncy balls. I got them all. I couldn't laugh. So I just made a sound like hoo 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 and went back to sleep. I feel a little bad about it now. I was once in the ER for incredibly painful abdominal pain, which they treated with morphine while assessing the source of the pain, in preparation for a CT scan. The technician explained that she needed to inject iodine into my bloodstream and that it would feel very warm and that some patients wet themselves as a result. I didn't do that. But when she asked me how I was doing, I said, my balls are really warm. She had to leave the room. They did that for my CT scan as well. I was on a lot of Dilaudid for pain and the nurse said to not freak out because it was going to feel like I pissed my pants, but I wasn't actually going to. It was so weird. They got mad at me for not staying still during the CT scan because I kept checking to see if I pissed myself. I pissed myself. Edit. My most upvoted comment is about how I pissed myself. Strangely. When I went under to have my appendix removed, I apparently kept telling everyone I could about my cat. Russell. I don't have a cat. Russell is a good name for a cat, though. My oral surgeon told me a knock knock joke while I was being put under for my wisdom teeth removal. Afterwards, he told me that I laughed so hard at the joke that I threw up and pissed my pants. He said no one had ever laughed that much at one of his jokes before. I don't remember any of it, but my pants were definitely moist while I was in the recovery room. It was pretty embarrassing for 23-year-old me. Before my surgery, my anesthesiologist asked me, do you want me to use the anesthesia? Or do you just want to hear my life story? As I was being wheeled into the OR for brain surgery, the drugs were heavily kicking in. My wife, referring to the 24 or so people preparing for the operation, said, "Man, there's an army of people here to take care of you." I replied, "How the hell are we going to feed them? Damn it, general anesthetic. This is no way to fight a war." I had a simple surgery about a year ago to remove some bone fragments I had floating around in my ankle when I broke it. Apparently right after they got me back from my anesthetic, they were asking me the date, where I was, and my name to make sure there were no complications. I apparently looked the male nurse dead in the eyes and told him, "You can call me Sally if it makes you feel better, but it isn't going to help you get lucky tonight." This happened as I was just waking up from surgery for something done below the waist. As I saw the nurses looking under my gown, they were laughing about something. And I said, usually when a woman looks down there she doesn't laugh, which caused them to laugh even harder. I had a colonoscopy done last year. I also have a tattoo of Bender from Futurama on my ass. Apparently I was very aggressive in trying to show the nurses and doctors my tattoo. That was a weird day. Seems to be some parallel irony between a robot on your ass and a robot in your ass. One time I was under and my doctor spoke to me briefly while standing outside my curtained room, with only his head peeping past the curtain. When he saw that I was awake and talking, he elaborately opened the curtain up to reveal a group of 10-15 people standing, watching me in my hospital bed. Apparently I kept saying that I was on an episode of Scrubs, and I wouldn't stop calling the doc JD. At 18 I had my wisdom teeth removed. I distinctly remember the doctor asking what I saw out of the window as I was going under. I realized later I described in great detail a topless woman and the window of the building across the street. But the doctor's office overlooked a field. I had a breast reduction several years ago, and when I came out of anesthesia I immediately punched my nurse in the face and started screaming and trying to get up and get away. It really didn't go well. I don't really remember them getting me out of the surgery center, but I remember on the way home I was screaming and cursing and just generally freaking out in an insane way. All while my mother attempted to keep me from hurting myself. I guess I thought I was in a captive situation and everyone was trying to kill me, or take my organs for the black market. I have no idea. When we got home she instantly handed me 2 of my prescribed Percocet and left me to drool and watch TV. I went back a week later and apologized to the nurse, gave her a gift certificate to a day spa, and gave the staff a bunch of baked goods. I felt awful about it. I work in the medical field, and I was the nightmare patient. You stole my boobs? Not a doctor, but I was sitting in the recovery room after my girlfriend had her appendix out, and they wheeled in an older woman. The nurses were talking about nursey stuff, like what cubicle to put her in. And the older woman goes, "Hey, quiet down back there, or I'm turning this car around right now," in a dopey anesthesia voice. On cue, both nurses go, "Sorry, Mom." The lady smiles. I was put under general anesthetic for surgery a few years ago. The doctor told me afterward that I vividly described what I called the greatest 7 minutes of PRN ever created. He said the nurse had to leave the room because she was so embarrassed. I have no idea what PRN I was even talking about and remember none of it. It wasn't the greatest PRN in the world. As a student, I spent a day observing and trying to be helpful in the recovery ward for a GI clinic. Think colonoscopy. I was bringing a gentleman's wife in to see him, and went over to see if he was fully awake. Now, this was a very proper gentleman who came in a 3-piece suit and seemed super embarrassed about the whole process. So, he looks up at me, farts, then says, "Nurse, I think I have just been violated," before falling back asleep. His wife just sorta stood there. I booked it out of the room. Spent 5 minutes laughing hysterically in the cleaning room. Surrounded by all manner of equipment designed to go into people. Edit. I can't grammar at 3 AM. Not a doctor. But I have had wisdom teeth removed. I remember my doctor mentioning that after I went under I started talking about lizards with hats. That doesn't trump what followed the surgery though. Upon being roused from my seat my father jokingly offered to let me drive home. He and the doctor had to chase me and take the keys from my hands. Next thing I remember is waking up on the couch making car noises. Edit. My new top comment. Thank you so much for the redditors who made this possible. Retired Nick paramedic. Gave a 14-year-old female 2 mg morphine for a badly broken lower leg with exposed bone. Brother thought to be funny to throw a stick under her as she rollerbladed. Long story short, in the bus en route to hospital she gets second dose and proceeds to say this is better than smoking pot and sucking dick, needless to say mom wasn't pleased. Had EMT step it up so I didn't have to deal with them screaming. I wonder if health workers learn to keep a few situation defusing responses at the ready for situations like that. When a parent starts to freak out. Oh. Mom, don't worry. That's just a movie quote. My mom was my driver while I had my wisdom teeth pulled and was in the room when I was being brought back from the anesthesia. I don't remember any of it, but my mother told me that the nurse told me that I had to keep my mouth still to stop the bleeding. I then proceeded to start singing Under Pressure by Queen, and when she told me to stop talking, I looked at her with a face full of disgust and said Freddie Mercury is a god and it's bullshit, you don't like him. This all happening while my mouth was stuffed with gauze. When I had my wisdom teeth taken out last summer, I tried to get into a fist fight with my doctor because he kept hitting my gag reflex and I was mad about it. When I came to, he was pretty pissed. Then while I was being led to the recovery room, the anesthetic made me feel tall. And I started laughing and said, what is this? An oral surgeon's office for ants. I shit you not. My memory is spotty. But I very vividly remember yelling that in the office. Then when I got to the recovery room, I asked for nachos. The nurse said no. And I cried for 3 hours afterwards. I was given anesthetics before a procedure. I told the anesthesiologist that I refused and was not going to go to sleep. I don't remember any of this. I was told that the conversation went like, no, I will not go to sleep. Doc. Son. This is not a battle you are going to win. They ended up giving me quite a bit more than they originally intended, and it took a lot longer to get me up and moving around afterward because of it. I had a 20-minute procedure that ended up with me being asleep for 3 hours. TLDR. Don't challenge your anesthesiologist. They will win. I once got a massive erection before my surgery. FK wouldn't go down for at least an hour according to the doctor. I imagine it was pretty distracting. Scrubbed in on an operation as a medical student. Had a patient, she was pretty too, basically waking up and started to caress my arm. I was also the only guy left in the room at the time. With the surgeon having closed and left to dictate the operative note. She pretty much zoned in on me. Started to cry. And touching me non-stop. I was simultaneously flattered and really embarrassed. Needless to say, she didn't remember a thing after a couple of hours. Not a doctor, but did end up in the ER a couple of years ago. There was this crazy guy in the ER with a relatively superficial stab wound. While waiting for a doctor to attend to the wound. But after receiving copious amounts of painkillers, he started squeezing and stretching the wound. Pretended it was a mouth. Had a super long and involved conversation with his stab wound. It was like a depraved version of the Vagina monologues. I was 16 when they removed my tonsils and put me under anesthetics. The one thing I remember is that I started laughing like a maniac and passed out. Next thing I remember is me holding my mom's hand. The nurses said later that they had to tie me to the operating table because I started to bite and scratch everybody. I scratched the doc pretty badly. Plus I screamed I can FCK on my own. I can FCK on my own. Or something. The whole time. Those bastards. Trying to help you penetrate a vagina when you are perfectly capable of doing it yourself. Had 2 operations about 10 years apart in the same hospital. Got wheeled into the pre-op room for the second operation and looked at a picture on the wall of an underwater scene. Recognized it from when I was 14 and had a flashback of talking endlessly under the pre-op anesthetic to the nurses the last time about the pretty dolphins. Attempted to relate this hilarious story at 25 to the nurses present and found myself raving about the pretty dolphins all over again. My husband had a couple of interesting times under anesthesia. When he was 19, he had surgery to remove part of his collarbone. When he was in recovery, he started violently punching and kicking every staff member who came too close to him. It took 3 doctors, his dad, who is not a small man, and a couple of male nurses to hold him down. He doesn't remember any of it. Then a couple years ago, he was going under conscious sedation to have a tooth pulled. I have no idea what went on. But when they let me into the recovery room with him, all 3 nurses were laughing and blushing. But no one would tell me what happened. Again. He doesn't remember a thing. All 3 nurses were laughing and blushing. But no one would tell me what happened. Tee. I am deathly afraid of needles, so I got laughing gas before getting put out when getting my wisdom teeth removed. My Indian dentist was testing how out of it I was to see if it was okay to put the needle in me and asked, "How high are you?" Really meaning, "How tall are you?" Full stop. I'm a stoner, so my natural response was, "I'm high as FCK dude." Full stop. Gave him a little laugh that day. When I was younger, I dislocated both my shoulders, a funny story itself. When I went to the hospital, they put me under, and when I woke I was still feeling the effects. My dad later told me that when woke up, I started to strip off all my clothes and called my doctor a dirty SLT multiple times. I guess I don't react well to anesthetic. I had to go under for a lithroscopy for a kidney stone. They shoot sound waves into your kidney to break up the stone. They had been giving me morphine all day, so I was feeling pretty good. And they brought me into the room for the procedure. They brought over the gas mask and asked if I was ready. I looked at the nurse and said, "FCK, yeah. Blast that FCK out of there with Slayer." Also, apparently after I woke up I would make the yapping sign with my hand when anyone tried to talk to me, and when I got up to pee one of the nurses tried to help me into the bathroom and I told him that if he wanted to see my dick he would have to wait like everybody else. Apparently when I was put under to get chemotherapy in my spine, I yelled, "Demons. Demons. The apocalypse is coming." I had watched a whole marathon of Supernatural the day before. When I had my wisdom teeth out, I told the oral surgeon to suck a bag of dicks in place of goodbye. Then I followed this woman and her 2 children around the parking lot of a convenience store because I thought she was my aunt. I went under GA when I was very young to remove something from a rather sensitive area of the body. Meat and 2 veg still all present and correct for clarification. After the operation I had no idea that the GA doesn't wear off straight after I woke up, and as my arms and head were working okay, and I needed a wicked piss, I swung my legs out and jumped out of the hospital bed to stand up. 5 minutes later I had crawled through the puddle of blood and teeth and finally made it to the loo. Nurses found me 10 minutes later trying to climb back into bed. TL. Doctor, don't assume your legs work after anesthetic. The last time I was in the hospital for a stab wound, I had to get stitches. Something went wrong and the gash got ripped open a little more. This was all when I was a young'un, so I'm not sure if all the details are correct, but I was told that they had to put me under. While going down I apparently grabbed an old lady nurse's, talking mid-50s, boobs, and told her I like my milk spoiled. I was 16 at the time. The last time I was in the hospital for a stab wound. Stabbing happens often to you? Saw this post and finally after almost a year of lurking had to join comment. I had shoulder surgery a few years ago and I was told that this happened while waking up from anesthesia. When in the recovery room, the nurse asked how I was feeling. I told her I had a fever. She replied, "No, your temperature looks normal." I again told her I knew I had a fever, but added that the only prescription was more cowbell. The nurse was confused, but I heard someone on the other side of the room start cracking up. Turns out it was the surgeon. Long story short, we became close friends and still hang out regularly to this day.